How to Sell Your Way Through Life, by Napoleon Hill, 1939. Part 4, A Rule for Winning Friends that has stood the test of more than 4,000 years of time. The remainder of this book describes a principle so important in all human relationships that it was chosen as the only fitting ending for the book. Before you read the description, I want you to be reminded that it was mainly due to his scrupulous observation of this principle that Franklin D. Roosevelt became the idol of the American people during his first term in office. After you have finished reading the analysis of this principle, I wish to call your attention to the fact that his neglect in application of this principle during his second term in office is costing the president much of the gains he made during his first term. Stating the facts in another way, the president sold himself into the hearts of the American people, one of the finest and ablest pieces of selling on record in the history of this country, by subordinating all his political and personal privileges for the benefit of the people as a whole. Had he continued serving the people in that same spirit of unselfishness through his second term in office, he would without doubt have gone down in history as one of America's greatest personalities. As you read the concluding chapters of this book, it will be beneficial to you if you carefully study and weigh both the records of Henry Ford and Franklin D. Roosevelt. If your analysis of the two men is sound, you will be forced to the conclusion that Ford, despite his handicap of a lowly beginning in poverty and illiteracy, has sold himself into a position of power from which he can never be removed by literally following the principle described in the closing pages of this book. You will also be forced to the conclusion that the president, despite his privileged advantages of wealth at birth and his 100-point personality, has met with a decline in popularity due to his neglect of this principle. A comparison of the records of the two men will be helpful to all who are trying to sell their way through life successfully, no matter what may be one's leanings toward or against both Roosevelt and Ford. 34. If I were president. If I were the president of the United States at this time, I would serve the people of America with an idea that might change the entire nation from chaos and conflict into harmony and understanding. I would take the idea to all the people, by radio and the public press. My radio speech would begin in these words. My friends, the time has come when we should speak plainly and think clearly. With your permission, I shall set an example of plain speech by saying we have come to the crossroads of civilization at which we must choose, because we have the choice of many roads. Today, our indebtedness amounts to almost $40 billion, and the amount is growing bigger every day. I hardly need to remind you that we have just passed through the worst economic crisis this country has ever known, and that this experience leveled us all down substantially to the same financial and spiritual foundation. To recoup our personal fortunes and eventually pay off our huge public debt, we must awaken anew our spiritual forces, subordinate our political and economic differences of opinion, and all pull together, and by this I mean that we must cooperate in both spirit and deed, each of us recognizing the fact that we are our brother's keeper whether we like it or not. It is time we understood the truth that we can remain the richest and freest people on earth, only by that form of cooperation which inspires hope and faith and trust in one another. It is time, also, we realize the need for a nationwide spiritual renaissance, without which mere business recovery will do us no permanent good. It is time we stopped talking about business recovery, and began talking of spiritual recovery, for it must be obvious to the most humble citizen of our country that we are spiritually bankrupt. Before we concern ourselves with the sins of other nations, with their impending wars and internal conflict, let us put our own house in order. We should begin by bringing about a better spirit of understanding between employers and their employees, who are now engaged in a form of warfare, that will, if they are not stopped, destroy not only the individuals directly engaged in the conflict, but more than 100 million innocent bystanders, men, women, and children generally known as the public. This nation is still a republic and we are a free people, with the right to help establish and maintain the political and economic principles that must support this and all other republics. I feel sure that no true American wants this nation to come under the control of one man or any form of minority rule. I feel sure that you will be willing to put your shoulders to the wheel of destiny, all of you, and help to keep it turning so that we may remain a free people. I have come to you through this personal appeal because I have a plan to offer for your approval, a plan that I know to contain the solution of our joint problem. The plan is no invention of mine, but it has the advantage of more than 4,000 years of testing that has proved, beyond room for doubt, it is practical. The plan is in no way connected with politics. It works no hardship on any human being. To put it into action calls for no personal sacrifice from anyone. It violates no man's religion. It offers immediate and definite financial and personal advantages to every citizen of our country. It will wipe out the conflict between capital and labor overnight. It will give every church in our land a new transfusion of spiritual energy as soon as it has been put into operation. It will establish a fine example for the people of other nations to follow, an example that might easily bring to them the same widespread freedom and economic benefits that we expect of it for our people. It is no exaggeration to state that the proposed plan is so laden with promise that it might easily wipe out all this rattling of swords and threats of war that now plague many of the countries of Europe. The sum and substance of this plan is a joint promise of the people of this nation, to be made in writing in a new Declaration of Independence, that they will return to the original principle on which this nation was founded, and that they will adopt and henceforth use the Golden Rule as the basis of all their business, professional, political, and personal relationships. Do not be alarmed, my friends, at the simplicity of this plan, for therein lies its strength. The plan is so simple that the most humble person can adopt and use it. It is within reach of both adults and the youths of the land. It is available, equally, to people of every race and creed. Use of the plan requires the consent of no one, and no one who adopts and uses it can be cheated of the benefits it provides, because those benefits are spiritual as well as economic in nature. To put this plan into practical operation, as quickly as possible, I shall ask the specific and hearty organized cooperation of the governors of all the states and the churches of all denominations. I feel privileged to call upon the churches for their cooperation because they will benefit greatly by the spiritual quickening of the people who commit themselves to live by the Golden Rule. For the purpose of simultaneous adoption of this plan, I hereby set aside 1 week, starting on the 25th of December and ending on the 1st of January of each year, to be known as Golden Rule Week, and I ask that during our first Golden Rule Week, each and every person sign a pledge to adopt and use this universal law as the basis of all human relationships. I would follow this speech with others until I had made the people of America so Golden Rule conscious, that they would begin to live by this great rule of human conduct. I would particularly address myself to the working men of America, directing their attention to the personal benefits to be gained by adopting and using this rule. Ideas rule the world. This is an idea, but it is not new. In fact, it has been preached for so long that most people have made the mistake of assuming it should be classified along with the many other subjects about which men have been preaching but not practicing. The world needs to revive this principle. If this idea were given 1/10 the front-page newspaper space that has been devoted to the discussion of the New Deal, pros and cons, and 1/10 the radio time the President has devoted to political discussions, it would solve all the major difficulties of this country within a few years. In my appeal to the people of America, I would go over the heads of the labor racketeers, over the heads of the professional politicians, over the heads of the Soviet propagandists working in the guise of labor agitators, and take the laboring men into my confidence. I would tell them the truth about the economic and political setup of this nation through which we have earned the right to speak of ourselves as the richest and freest country on earth. I would plainly describe to the working men the truth that this country has always been, and of necessity must remain, a capitalistic country. I would frankly admit that the nation has two capitals, one of them purely economic in nature, with headquarters in Wall Street, and the other purely political, with headquarters in Washington. I would call attention to the fact that men who manage capital and the men who do the labor of industry and business are, and must remain, friendly partners, and I would emphasize the fact that labor represents the physical body of the nation while capital is the lifeblood that keeps that body healthy and alive. I would plainly tell the working men of America that without the capitalistic system, this nation's political system would have to be changed. I would show them that any organized movement to take away from capital more than is put into it will result in capital's destruction. I would call their attention to the fact that individual happiness comes through individual effort and self-determination, not by mass effort. I would say to the working men that they have every right to organize and negotiate as a group, but I would caution them to use the same philosophy, in their dealings with capital, that an individual must use if he rises to power and accumulates riches without violating the rights of others. I would go back into the history of the men who have made America, and I would point out to the working men the significant fact that most of these men came up from the ranks of labor, from beginnings as humble as that of any man now living, and I would call attention to the advantages of this privilege and ask if there are any who would wish to have it taken away from them. I would compare the privileges now enjoyed by the working men of America with those of the people of Soviet Russia, Italy, and Germany, and find out how many would exchange what they have for what they might have as citizens of any of those countries. I would bring out the files of the Department of Justice and the State Department, and I would disclose to the people of America the exact conditions existing in countries in which business and industry have been taken over by self-appointed dictators, as they affect laboring men. I would take the working men of America on an imaginary trip through Russia and let them see, for themselves, how many chickens in every pot and automobiles in every garage the people of that country possess. I would name the Russian agents now working secretly in this country for the overthrow of our industrial system. I would set the Secret Service men on their trail and expose every move they make. I would put government speakers and propagandists in the field, and for every speech made for the destruction of our industrial system, I would have a better and more logical one made on behalf of this system. I would organize the churches of this nation and ask them to go to work in earnest and help our people get themselves out of spiritual bankruptcy. I would ask that at least one day each week be devoted to some form of church service with the object of selling America to its people. I would ask the newspapers to give over column 1 on their front pages for the purpose of carrying a daily message to the people on the merits of the richest and freest country on earth, would draft the ablest writers to use this prominent space for the purpose of acquainting our people with the multiple blessings we now enjoy, and the reasons for protecting our right to these blessings. I would draft the ablest novelists in the country and ask them to start writing books glorifying the spirit of freedom we enjoy in this country. I would pick out at least one outstanding business in each state, and induce the management of that business and the laboring men who serve it, to adopt and use the golden rule in all their relationships with one another and with the public they serve. Then, I would ask the public to go out of its way to patronize those businesses and to prove that virtue is not without its direct, immediate, and enduring financial reward. I would explode, once and forever, that old bromide about the golden rule not being practical with men and conditions the way they are in the world today. I would ask the schools and colleges of the country to begin teaching the principles of success, the principles that enabled Carnegie, Rockefeller, Edison, and others of their type, to rise from lowly beginnings to positions of fame and fortune, and I would call attention to the fact that where there was one opportunity during the early days of these men, there now exists 100. I would call attention to the great opportunities, not merely for an occasional individual, but for millions of men and women of all ages, which have grown out of the industrial development and advancement we enjoy in this country through the help of our economic capital on Wall Street. I would apologize for having made the mistake of referring to the industrial leaders of America as the economic royalists, and I would encourage every working man to aim for leadership in the business or industrial field. I would tell the people of America that from the beginning of civilization on up to this very moment, the great leaders, the successful men in every calling, have always rendered more service and better service than they were paid to render. I would tell them that no one has ever been known to enjoy permanent success without giving the best he had to offer, not only in quantity and quality of service, but particularly in friendly spirit mixed generously with the service. What we all need in this country today is information, enlightenment, truth. We need to know what we have, as citizens of this country, and how we got it. We need to know more about Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, J. P. Morgan, the DuPonts, and others of their type who have been responsible for industrial America, who have made possible every job in the land paying wages or a salary. The farmers of the country need to know that the surplus food they raise and market is purchased by the industrial system created by the men whom paid agitators are trying to undermine. In brief, We all need to know that this is an industrial, capitalistic nation, and the moment that system is destroyed our freedom goes with it. We boast of our privilege of a free press and the right of free speech, but we overlook the danger of these privileges. Right now, free speech is being used to undermine the very foundation of individual freedom, as anomalous as that may seem. Let us keep our free press and our free speech, by all means, but let us use them to advertise the virtues and the benefits and the riches and the blessings and the privileges we enjoy. Nature has a queer way of taking away from us the things we do not use. Tie an arm to one side, remove it from use, and it soon atrophies and withers. Place an arm in back of a heavy tool, give it systematic use, and nature rewards it with strength and power. Neglect the gardens and fields and nature takes them back to the jungle. Sleep upon our rights to free speech and a free press, and the agents of foreign countries step in and use these weapons to confuse and mislead us. There are sins of omission and sins of commission. In this country, we are grossly guilty of both types, but particularly of sins of omission. Our major sin of omission is this: we have no plan for maintaining our freedom by mass thought and action. Fewer than 5 million men organized in the form of labor unions are in position to establish the price of food and of every other commodity, and the other 125 million of us can do nothing but pay through the nose. What this country needs, right now, is not a good 5-cent cigar but sufficient interest in our own affairs to make the fullest use of our boasted privilege of freedom of speech and press. How to Sell Your Way Through Life, by Napoleon Hill, 1939. 35. The Golden Rule in Use. I wear a fine, highly adjusted watch that keeps perfect time. If I took the watch apart, placed all the parts in a hat, and shook the hat the remainder of my life, the parts would not assemble themselves into the splendid time-measuring machine that now serves me. The reason is that at the back of the watch is a carefully organized and thoroughly tested plan that must be followed before the parts can be correlated, organized, and made into a working unit. My watch keeps time because the many parts were assembled in the mind of a man who understood watches and followed a definite plan for putting the pieces together. I have had the privilege of analyzing thousands of people, some of them among the wealthiest and most successful men known to the American people, some of them complete failures. In every instance, the man who succeeded had followed a definite plan, and the man who failed had neglected to follow a plan. From this observation I deduced that there is always a cause for success, also a cause for failure. As a matter of fact, I learned from my research that there are 17 fundamental principles of success, some combination of which is always used by the person who succeeds in any undertaking. One of the most important of these principles happens to be the one that most people are neglecting today. It is the principle known as the Golden Rule, in connection with which thousands of sermons have been preached, without its practicability having been impressed upon the minds of men. This simple rule of human conduct means that whatever we do to or for another, we do to or for ourselves. Understand this distinction and the Golden Rule will take on an entirely different meaning. I am not going to preach a sermon on the Golden Rule, but I am going to give you first-hand, reliable information about the way it works. To give you this first-hand information, I must use personal illustrations, for I can be absolutely sure only of my own motives and emotions. The real motives and feelings of others are necessarily based upon observation. The view that I here present has nothing to do with morals. It has nothing to do with the hereafter. It deals with the here and now. It offers a solution of the pressing problems of life, which every man faces from day to day. Moreover, it offers the individual the best possible of all roads to happiness, for the very good reason that for one person to succeed under this rule he does not have to cause others to fail. I was prompted to write this confession because of the feudal war now going on between capital and labor. It is futile because both sides are sure to lose when the final count has been taken, for it is a law, as immutable as the law of gravitation, that the man who destroys his neighbor destroys also himself. Have you ever thought of that? Come with me for a look backward over the years that have flown all too rapidly, and let us analyze some of the results of the Golden Rule applied. At the close of the World War, Arthur Nash, a Cincinnati merchant tailor, found his business practically on the rocks. He lacked operating capital. His business had fallen off to where the overhead was eating up the profits. He could find no more capital, so, in sheer desperation, everything else having failed, observe well the statement everything else having failed, as a last resort he put the golden rule to the test. Calling in all of his employees, he told them the fix the business was in. He said there was but one chance in 10,000 to save the business, and with their cooperation, he would take that chance. He offered to take every employee into partnership with him, giving everyone a share in the profits, on the condition that they all would forget hours, forget personal conveniences and comforts, and put everything they had into their jobs. If that will not save the business, he said, then nothing can save it, but I believe if we put our hearts and heads and souls together, we are bound to win. The employees believed so, too. They joined heads, hearts, and hands. And that was not all. They went into old socks, saving accounts, and other secret hiding places and brought out their meager savings and dumped the entire amount into the business. That helped, but the thing that did the most good was the spirit they put into the business, the sincere spirit of desire to make the business go. The business did go. In fact, it prospered as it never had before. I had the privilege of writing the first magazine story about the experiment, and believe it or not, this man, Arthur Nash, and his employees, who did nothing more than practice the golden rule, made the front pages of the leading newspapers of the country, and they were given generous space in the leading magazines. The unusual experiment had received $1 million worth of free front-page publicity that could not have been bought with mere money, at any price. When Arthur Nash died some years later, he was a wealthy man and his tailoring business was flourishing as but few such businesses have ever profited. That which he did for his employees, he did for himself. They saw to that. There are no hidden secrets to this unusual achievement. The episode is now a matter of record, a well-advertised and well-known record at that, yet, almost 20 years have passed since Arthur Nash appropriated the golden rule and put it to work in his business. There is no patent right on the golden rule. Anyone who chooses may adopt the rule and put it to work. It is one of the few rules any employer, any employee, or any neighbor may put into operation without someone complaining. Perhaps that is one thing wrong with the great rule, it is too free. Perhaps if a law were passed making it an offense to apply this rule, more people would begin bootlegging it into operation. Some years ago, Henry Ford startled the entire industrial world by announcing that from that day on he would pay his men a minimum wage of $5 per day, regardless of their positions. Everyone had an opinion about Mr. Ford's new policy, but hardly anyone foresaw the effect it would have on his men and his business. His competitors in industry yelled treason, his wild scheme, they reckoned, would wreck him and other businesses, too, if others tried to follow his example. They were wrong. Far from wrecking Ford, the move was one of the wisest he ever made. Let us briefly summarize the benefits it brought to Ford. First, it gave him the pick of labor, for everyone wanted to work for a man voluntarily paying such wages. It also cut down the operating expense of the business by automatically making every employee more or less his own supervisor. No employee getting such wages dared take the risk of losing his job by soldiering or by turning out work of poor quality or too little in quantity. The benefits did not end here. The plan practically ensured the Ford business against labor troubles for over 20 years, because it was so much more liberal than any labor leader could possibly promise. Labor union protection in the Ford plants became unnecessary. And, even today, when union labor leaders seem to have lost all sense of self-control, John L. Lewis took good care to pick General Motors for his first battle in the automotive field instead of tackling Ford. Ford may not have intended to run his business by the golden rule when he voluntarily raised wages, but the effect was exactly the same. The deed was what counted. Somewhere in my travels, I saw a motto consisting of 3 short, simple words, which impressed me more than all other mottos I have ever seen. It said, "Deeds, not words." The more I see of men, those who succeed in a big way, financially, and those who go down in utter failure, the more I am convinced that too many reverse this motto, reading it backward: words, not deeds, as a group of words. The golden rule is nothing but so many sounds, of themselves without practical benefit. When translated into deeds, these words tell another and a vastly different story. The golden rule, when translated into deeds, is the equivalent of rendering more service and better service than that for which one is paid. Moreover, to benefit to the fullest by this great rule of human conduct, one must render that sort of service, a truth that all leaders would do well to learn and to impress upon their followers. I have made a very startling discovery about the power of the golden rule, something I never knew before, and of which I have heard nothing, viz., when a man is in difficulty, the very best thing he can do to overcome it is to find some other person or persons who, likewise, are in difficulty and help them out. In doing so he will find, with but few exceptions, that in having helped his neighbor he has also helped himself. Help thy brother's boat across, and lo, thine own hath reached the shore. Varied and far-reaching are the effects of rendering service based upon the golden rule, service that gives the best one has to offer. All the labor unions on earth could never provide any individual with the advantages he may gain for himself by adopting and living the golden rule, putting into his efforts the best he has, not once in a while, but always, as a matter of principle. Those who render that sort of service never need the help of a labor union, or of any other power, to gain for themselves the best that life has to offer. People who literally live by the golden rule possess an almost uncanny power to attract and please others and have no difficulty in gaining willing cooperation. Not long ago, I was invited to spend a day with Herman Schatzman, of the Western Union Telegraph Company, who volunteered to take me on a long automobile trip that brought us into contact with many people under many different circumstances. I was astonished to observe the manner in which people everywhere went out of their way to be courteous to Mr. Schatzman, a fact that was so obvious that I began to analyze him to determine the cause. On one occasion, he drove up to a private estate that was guarded by a policeman at the entrance gate. Before waiting for the policeman to speak, Mr. Schatzman said, "We are interested in seeing the estate, will you be good enough to open the gate for us?" The policeman turned and started to open the gate, then hesitated, looked around and asked, "Whom do you wish to see?" "The public is not admitted here, you know." Instantly, Mr. Schatzman replied, "I want to show my friends this beautiful place." Without another word, the policeman opened the gate and we passed through. On our way out I saw him looking us over very quizzically, obviously wondering why he violated his instructions by admitting us. I, too, wondered why he allowed us to enter. Before the day was over, I learned the secret. Shortly afterward, Mr. Schatzman had the misfortune to have one of his tires go flat in a crowded section of Newark, New Jersey. To make matters worse, the tire went flat right in front of a private business entrance, where we were compelled to block the passageway. A policeman was directing traffic not more than 100 feet away. When he saw the predicament we were in, he walked over to the car, looked at the flat tire, and was about ready, I am sure, to order us to get out of there, when Mr. Schatzman spoke up with a broad smile on his face and said, "Now isn't this just a man's luck, to have a tire go flat in a busy place like this?" The policeman changed the scowl on his face to a broad grin and answered back, "You said it, brother." Then, to my amazement, he volunteered to direct traffic around us, and gave Mr. Schatzman directions to the nearest garage. The job required nearly an hour, but that policeman did not utter a single word of reprimand, and when the tire had been changed and we were ready to leave, he walked over to us, smiled generously, and wished us better luck the next time a tire went bad. Later in the day, Mr. Schatzman got to a red light a few seconds too late, but decided to go on through. When he was about halfway across the intersection, a police whistle blew loudly, and a big strapping policeman walked over with that "I've got you this time" manner about him. Again, Mr. Schatzman beat him to the draw and began by saying, "How stupid of me not to look up at that light. When I looked at it about a block back, it was green." The policeman just looked at him for a few seconds, then smiled and waved us back into position, without opening his mouth. After I had traveled with Mr. Schatzman the better part of an entire day, and had seen him treated with the utmost courtesy by taxicab drivers, policemen, and diverse other persons who usually do not take the trouble to be courteous, I discovered the secret. It was simply this: Schatzman truly likes people, all of them. He reflects this liking not only in all his deeds but in all his thoughts as well. On occasions, when I ventured to analyze some person in the public eye whose personal conduct I did not approve, Schatzman always came back with an expression of some virtue or good quality that person possessed that I had deliberately ignored. Here, then, is a man whose very personality is so thoroughly charged with positive, constructive thoughts of others that they quickly pick up this attitude and reflect it back to him as their own. This is one of the queer, imponderable traits of human nature, but it is decidedly a trait. People act toward us, in thought as well as deed, in a manner corresponding to our thoughts. Not only do people do this but animals as well. A dog knows instantly when he meets a stranger who dislikes dogs, and generally he shows his dislike in return. Thoughts do have a way of telegraphing themselves from one brain to another. As I rode through the country with Hermann Schatzman that day, I wondered what it would be worth to every concern employing men and women if his spirit of love for his fellow man and his refusal to speak ill of others could be injected into the minds of both the employer and the employees. That simple spirit, alone, would end all labor disputes such as those that threaten the very foundation of this country. It would do more than that: it would bring to men and women poise and peace of mind, such as never can be known by those who load their minds with greed, malice, hatred, and envy. Before my day with Hermann Schatzman was ended, I did some philosophizing by asking myself why, with all of our marvelous systems of education, no one has ever thought of teaching boys and girls, as they go through the schools, the advantages of thinking in terms of human kindness. Also, I could not help wondering why the leaders of both capital and labor have never discovered the manifold blessings they might enjoy for themselves and their followers by the simple procedure of thinking of one another in terms of human kindness. I fear that one of the greatest weaknesses of most of us is our tendency to look everywhere except to our own state of mind, for the causes of our difficulties throughout life, and I know, beyond any room for doubt, that we are where we are and what we are, financially and spiritually, because of the dominating thoughts that occupy our minds. How to Sell Your Way Through Life, by Napoleon Hill, 1939. 36. Mental attitude must be right. Not long ago, I had the privilege of spending an evening with Madame Esperanza Garriga, an internationally known teacher of singing who gave me an interesting account of the early experiences of Graham McNamee. Mr. McNamee wanted to be a singer, but he lacked the money to pay for his education. Madame Garriga looked him over, studied him carefully, and reached the conclusion he was worth her effort after she learned that he wanted to become a singer so badly that he was willing to starve, if necessary, so she took him on and gave him the best she had. After he made a reputation as a radio announcer, and money began to come freely, Mr. McNamee went to Madame Garriga and offered to pay up his debt to her. She refused to accept money, so he asked her to let him pay in another way, by giving to some other young man the same opportunity she had given to him when he was without money, the bill to be paid by him. They spent more than $150 advertising for a suitable young man, and finally found him, strangely enough, working as a page boy in the broadcasting studio. After 6 years of training, the lad was launched on a very promising career as a singer. McNamee's debt had been discharged. It is little wonder that he is making a fortune as a radio announcer. It is little wonder that the public likes him. Perhaps most people do not know why the voice of Graham McNamee is so pleasing. I am sure I did not until I learned about his philosophy of dealing with others, but the truth is, he colors his voice with a mental attitude that reflects the golden rule. He thinks kind thoughts of his fellow men, he lives the golden rule in his thoughts and in his deeds, therefore he is prospering. When I say he is prospering, I have reference not only to material opulence but also to spiritual riches, for Graham McNamee must need to be at peace with himself because he is at peace with his fellow men. Whatsoever a man soweth that shall he also reap. Thousands of sermons have been preached from this text, but few of them conveyed the real meaning of the philosophy back of the short sentence. Probably the greatest fortune in America, if not in the entire world, is the Rockefeller fortune. For more than a quarter of a century, the Rockefellers, father and son, devoted most of their time to giving away money. So that it might be given away wisely, a large staff of scientists and business experts are employed through the Rockefeller Foundation. Their business is to see that the money is used for the greatest good to the greatest number. Despite these huge gifts, amounting to nearly $1 billion, the Rockefeller estate continues to grow and to prosper. Everything the Rockefellers touch turns into riches. And one of the strange facts concerning the Rockefeller gifts is that they are not made for the purpose of getting. The last sentence contains a thought well worth analysis by those who wish to make practical use of the Golden Rule. The elder Rockefeller may or may not have used cruel methods in dealing with his competitors during his younger days when the Rockefeller fortune was not so great. The fact remains that the Rockefellers have been generous to the public in the use of their money, and some power not easily isolated, has been generous to the Rockefellers by bringing back more money than they ever gave away. Charles M. Schwab was fortunate enough to become associated with Andrew Carnegie when he was a very young man. I have Mr. Carnegie's word for it that Schwab needed no one to supervise him, no time clock to record his coming and going. Schwab was his own supervisor, and as for hours, well, he was on hand when needed, no matter how many hours he had to put in. Did Mr. Carnegie demand this sort of service? He did not. It was young Schwab's own idea. Did it pay him to render more service and better service than Mr. Carnegie asked of him? Wouldn't he have been better off if he had been flanked by a labor union whose leaders would have seen to it that he did not put in more than 8 hours a day? The answer to that is interesting. By setting his own hours, by giving in both quality and quantity of service far more than any employer could possibly have asked of him, Mr. Schwab set his own wage scale, more than any labor union could have demanded, and Mr. Carnegie was happy to pay it. Sometimes the pay amounted to as much as $1 million in 1 year. When Schwab went to work for Carnegie, he was inexperienced and poor. His schooling was slight indeed. However, he had a certain state of mind, a mental attitude one might say, that gained for him advantages and privileges often withheld from men who insist on measuring their services out by the time clock and union wage scales. This state of mind, which proved to be so very profitable to Mr. Schwab, was, as Mr. Carnegie expressed it, very contagious. Those who worked with Schwab quickly picked up his mental attitude, and they, in turn, passed it on to others, and this led to harmony throughout the works. Harmony is an intangible thing, but it is worth a lot of money to those who can inspire it. You can't overestimate the value of this principle. Use it wherever you can. Schwab inspired harmony and good feeling because he had the right mental attitude toward other people. It was this same mental attitude that gave him the reputation of being one of America's greatest salesmen. Of course, he is a great salesman. He is great because his mental attitude is constructive and contagious. Other people who contact him pick up his state of mind and reflect it back to those around them. A young stenographer who once worked for Schwab said, "To be privileged to contact his mind daily is worth more than all the college degrees in the world." It has the effect of causing one to want to be decent to other people. What a tribute! Yet, Schwab's mental attitude cost him nothing but self-control plus a genuine desire to be pleasant to people. Such an attitude has many advantages. It not only attracts and pleases people and causes them to willingly cooperate, but it also gives one peace of mind and personal satisfaction such as may be had in no other way. Schwab converted his mental attitude into millions of dollars. He made it supply employment to hundreds of thousands of men, to whom he has paid out and continues to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in salaries and wages. Verily, the Golden Rule attitude is an Aladdin's lamp that never fails. How long will it be until men learn the importance of mental attitude? How long will it be until men learn that their own state of mind, and nothing else, fixes their incomes and measures their worth to the world? How long will it be until men begin to control their state of mind? Answer these questions and you will become as rich and famous as Schwab, Rockefeller, or any of the others who, very evidently, knew the answer. If there is one thing more than all else that makes a person indispensable to his employer, or to the public, it is right mental attitude. While I am on the subject of Carnegie and Schwab, I may as well here call attention to the fact that Carnegie's mental attitude was right. He knew the value of mental attitude, of pleasing personality, and did not hesitate to pay a high price for these qualities. But few employers would have permitted Schwab to receive $1 million a year, no matter how much he may have been worth. The common tendency during Mr. Carnegie's day was to chisel men down to the lowest wage possible. He knew better. He knew that the best of all possible ways to gain and keep the sort of service rendered by Schwab was to permit such men to receive reward in proportion to their actual value. The fact that Carnegie made more millionaires than any man engaged in the steel business speaks loudly in support of his superior wisdom. Almost constantly I hear men say, "Oh, yes, I believe in the golden rule, and I would like to apply it in my business, but to do so would be financial suicide, because others would not live by the same rule." I must confess that I, too, was at one time guilty of taking the same erroneous attitude toward this great rule of human conduct. The truth of the matter is that those who live by this rule cannot be cheated of their compensation, no matter how many others may refuse to live by it, for the very simple reason that those who practice this rule build in themselves that imponderable spiritual something known as the right mental attitude, which attracts friends, favorable opportunities, ideas, and circumstances they could neither recognize nor embrace without this attitude. Like attracts like. Suppose those with whom you do business refuse to live by the golden rule, while you observe it. The loss will be theirs, not yours. True, they may cheat you at trade when they have the opportunity because of your scrupulous observance of this rule, but for every person who does so you will attract a dozen who will go out of their way to favor you, and you will be more than repaid for any losses you may have sustained. The law of compensation works in this way. I have often heard it said that when one is ready for anything it always puts in its appearance. The first time I heard that I doubted the truth of it. That was because I lacked understanding of the golden rule, also because I did not know the real meaning of being ready. Had I not been ready all my life for plenty of money, and had I not been ready for complete happiness, and had I not been ready for plenty of friends, without any of these desirable things having shown up? No, the truth is I had not been ready for these things. Readiness to receive means clearing the mind and developing the right mental attitude. Many people make the error, too, of confusing their need for things with their readiness to receive. There is but little, if any, connection between one's needs and what one actually gets. We all need money, we need friends, we need opportunities, but we may receive none of these things until we create the right mental attitude. Through some strange form of mind chemistry with which science is not familiar, those who literally live by the golden rule, and know why they live by it, thereby create the mental attitude so essential to attract the desirable things of life. Remember, I do not expect you to be impressed by these statements unless and until you get first-hand knowledge of the truth I am trying to convey. The magic power of the golden rule is something that cannot be described, or imparted to another, by words alone. Knowledge of this great law comes only through deeds. Start to live the golden rule and soon you will know more of its nature than I could convey in 100 years of continuous effort. Perhaps this clue to the nature of this rule will be helpful. You will never receive the benefits of the rule by merely believing in it or talking about it. More than 25 years ago, I began to study the causes of success and failure. For almost a quarter of a century, I stuck to my chosen purpose, although my labor brought no monetary income. Many of my friends believed that I was wasting my time because I had to earn my living in other ways as I went along. The trouble with their reasoning was that they misjudged what constitutes pay. It is true that I helped thousands of people to find a solution to their own problems without, in any way, gaining monetary advantages for myself, but consider for a moment what these thousands of people gave to me. By studying their problems and helping to solve them, I gained the knowledge necessary to write a practical philosophy of individual achievement. That philosophy now serves men and women throughout the world, and provides me with all the income one need. My income is not derived from the people to whom I have rendered service directly, but it comes from others who willingly pay me for the knowledge I gained while rendering that service. In this way, the law of compensation does work. How to Sell Your Way Through Life, by Napoleon Hill, 1939. 37. Some Personal Experiences. Going back again to the question of right mental attitude as being the first step toward making oneself ready to receive the blessings of life, I want to describe the most dramatic and the most important experience of my life. While waiting for the business depression to pass, I was approached by two men who induced me to go on a nationwide lecture tour with them. As I learned later, their motive was thoroughly dishonest and entirely selfish. They wanted to use my name as a means of gaining the confidence of people whom they could not approach without this entree. Their purpose was to sell stock in a moving picture project. These men not only cheated many of my friends whom they met through me and caused me great embarrassment, but they also cheated my relatives and myself out of rather large sums of money. Some of my friends wished to have them arrested, but I protested, saving them from jail. Moreover, I assumed full obligation for every cent they took away from my friends, and this is why I did so. While I was on the lecture tour, I met a lady who later became my wife. She brought into my life such priceless spiritual and mental assets that I felt it my duty to give full credit to these misguided gentlemen who had cheated my friends, because it was they who were responsible for my meeting her. They cheated me of money, but, whether they intended to do so or not, they paid me in something much more precious than all the money in the world. Doubtless, these gentlemen will be surprised to learn that by cheating me, they removed themselves from the possibility of sharing an opportunity that would have yielded them, in cash, more than 10 times the amount they actually procured through their dishonesty. Every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. There never is an exception to this rule. That is why many so-called failures prove to be blessings instead. The late Thomas A. Edison emphasized the truth of this when asked if his deafness had not been a great handicap to him. No, he replied, it has been a blessing because it forced me to listen from within. This led to the development of my sixth sense through which most of my inventions were perfected. Emerson was right when he said, "No one can damage you except yourself." Not long ago, my wife originated and perfected a game designed to make the player conscious of the hazards of automobiles. After it had been perfected, she turned it over to one of our acquaintances to market, with the understanding the money received would be divided equally between them. The next she heard of her game, it had been patented in his name, and he had sold it to a large manufacturer of games on the representation that it was his own property. Did we take him into court and ask that he be jailed for fraud? We did nothing of the sort. No court in the land could have settled the transaction as satisfactorily as we settled it for ourselves. Here is exactly what we did. First, we went to the lawyer who filed the patent in this man's name and pointed out to him that the application for the patent was based on fraud, that the patent really belonged, in its entirety, to the creator of the game. We submitted evidence to support our claim, after which the lawyer acknowledged that the game belonged to my wife. Then, we agreed to accept an assignment of a percentage of the royalty returns in lieu of our rights, a smaller percentage than we originally agreed to accept. Our offer was accepted and the matter closed. Now, let us take inventory and see who was the loser in the transaction. There was a hidden asset in the transaction of priceless value to both my wife and myself, an asset that no court could possibly have evaluated, an asset that even the man who tried to cheat could not have recognized had it been called to his attention, an asset that gives a clue as to why it is true that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. That asset consisted of the discovery that my wife possessed a genuine creative talent. It took the foul intentions of a dishonest man to uncover this talent and center our attention upon it. Starting from that point, with that discovery as a guide, we made another discovery of still greater importance. We discovered that this same creative ability could be transmuted into other channels. This newly discovered ability of my wife's is destined to be of great service to me in 1,000 ways. Do we hold a grudge against the dishonest acquaintance who, as far as his own intentions were concerned, would have cheated my wife out of her rights to her own creative ability? We do nothing of the sort. Instead, we include him, almost at the top of the list, in a group of people whom we bless daily, people who have contributed in one way or another to our personal development and advancement. Right underneath his name are the names of the two men who swindled me out of a large sum of money and led me on a wild goose chase through the South, where I met the one person who has brought to me the richness that can come only from spiritual growth. Earlier in life, I looked upon philosophers such as Emerson as long-haired gentlemen who had a lot of theories but little or no practical ability to cope with the pressing problems of life. Now, I have reversed myself. My reversal was forced by life itself. I now know that every person should be skilled in at least the elementary fundamentals of philosophy. Every person should at least know every effect has a cause and should know how to judge causes by their effects. How to Sell Your Way Through Life, by Napoleon Hill, 1939. 38. The War Between Employers and Employees. In this battle which is now raging between capital and labor, we may see, if we look, the benefits of philosophy. Take John L. Lewis, for example, and study the man and his deeds. Obviously, his purpose is to gain control of both industry and the government. For the time being, it looks as if he were winning. It would seem that everything of advantage is on his side. Even the government, through its leaders, has been temporarily thrown into the balance on the side of Lewis. But these facts are apt to mislead those who do not go deeper and study cause and effect. Whatsoever a man soweth that shall he also reap. In that brief sentence, you may find the answer as to what will happen to Lewis and all who are encouraging and supporting him. You need not be a skilled philosopher or a prophet to foretell what will happen to Lewis. It is certain he will pass out of the picture by the operation of a law just as inexorable as the law of death. And the reason for this is the fact that many leaders destroy instead of build. Time is the mortal enemy of the person who destroys. Time is the friend of the person who builds. Not all the men in the world could change this law. No president or politician can give Lewis surcease from this immutable law. When his political end comes, mark this statement and remember it, it will come as the result of his own handiwork, and the power that will bring about his end will be supplied by those whom he now calls his followers. American workmen may not be schooled in letters, but they do have a lot of sound horse sense. When they come to themselves, as they always have in the face of a national crisis, they seem to know what to do and they have the courage to do it. While we are making references to Lewis, let us also turn our attention to those who are opposing him. Lewis has cast his own doom, so there is nothing anyone can do about it. With the employers of labor whom he is so viciously fighting, the situation is different. Although many of them have made grave mistakes in their dealings with labor, there is still time for them to save themselves. Any employer who chooses to do so can immediately and permanently set up a barrier against Lewis and the Lewis philosophy, a barrier that neither those in control of the United States government nor Lewis can possibly remove. Henry Ford almost discovered this barrier when he put into operation his famous $5 a day minimum wage scale, over 20 years ago. Walter Chrysler faintly flirted with it when he voluntarily raised the wages of his workmen by a total of more than $50 million. But neither of these gentlemen went quite far enough. There is available to the employers, and to Lewis, too, for that matter, a law that no Supreme Court can reverse or declare unconstitutional. It is none other than the Golden Rule, the varied combination and applications of which I have tried to describe. If Walter Chrysler had gone over John L. Lewis's head and dealt directly with his men when he announced that $50 million wage increase and had frankly told them from then on they were partners in the business and as such would be permitted to share in the profits the same as the stockholders who bought a share of those profits with monetary investment, he would have had Lewis stopped forever. Of course, there should have been strings attached to the privilege extended to the men sharing in the profits, one of which should have been the condition that they changed their mental attitude and put into their work not only a certain number of hours of time, but a definite spirit of willingness to do their very best. The offer should have carried with it a complete list of the conditions under which the men would be permitted to share in the profits. The conditions should have called for Golden Rule services in return for Golden Rule pay. There is nothing to stop any employer from going over the heads of self-appointed labor leaders and dealing directly with his own people on the Golden Rule basis. All the Wagner acts in the world cannot stop an employer from dealing with his men on the golden rule basis, and all the labor demagogues on earth, and there are many of them, could never gain control of the employees who were in partnership with their employer on the golden rule basis. Some will say, "Oh, that will never work. No employer is going to pay wages to his men and then give them a part of the profits." Too, with that viewpoint, I cannot agree. The truth is this, nothing less: the employers, all of them, are going to be compelled to deal with their men on the golden rule basis or lose their right to remain employers. Everything, by which civilization may be judged, points in this direction. These are changed times in which we are living. It clearly indicates a sharp turn in the path of civilization, a turn that is destined to force men to deal with one another on the golden rule basis. But waiving this viewpoint on the ground that it is merely a theory, or that it is too idealistic, let us take another view of the situation. The employer, who voluntarily takes his employees into his business on a profit-sharing basis, will earn greater profits than he earned on the old basis of paying only wages. In the first place, the superior quality and quantity of service the employees will render, under the golden rule treatment, will supply the extra money the employer will pay them, not to mention the savings in strikes and damages to property. Arthur Nash proved that point beyond any room for doubt. Moreover, the money now being spent by many employers to fight Lewis and other labor leaders would, if given directly to the employees, under some practical working plan based on the golden rule, be sufficient to pay this employee dividend fee. Henry Ford came very near to the adoption of the golden rule policy when he launched his $5 minimum wage scale. He fell short because it was then and it still is obvious that his move was cleverly designed for the exact result it produced, namely, to outwit the labor unions and ensure greater efficiency from his workers. It produced those effects, but the thing that was lacking in the deal, the power that would have made it stand out like the Rock of Gibraltar against all foes who might have tried to control the Ford business, was the golden rule spirit. The policy was inaugurated in too cold-blooded a manner. It reflected the cold, unyielding determination of Henry Ford, but not the warmth of brotherly love so plainly laid down in that brief sentence by the Master in the Sermon on the Mount. The Chrysler $50 million wage increase might just as well have been dumped into the ocean for all the good it did his company. Everyone knows that it was a last-minute sop thrown to his men as a bribe to keep out of the hands of Lewis. The deed itself was commendable, but the spirit in which it was done was without that vital force that moves mountains. In these two cases, both well known to everyone, may be found a hint to employers of America as to the way out for them. There is no other way out except surrender of their property and perhaps their privilege of free citizenship. Perhaps the line, "It can't happen here," was sound enough for the title of a bestseller, but few real thinkers doubt that it can happen here, because it has already happened in spots throughout the country. In all this conflict between capital and labor, the contending parties and most of the public seem not to have thoroughly understood the meaning of the word capital. Capital and labor consist of three factors, namely, 1. Men who labor with their hands, 2. Money or its equivalent in the form of credit, and 3. The brains that manage and direct the use of both labor and money. The last item is by far the most important of the three, for brains capable of managing and directing the efforts of men and of conserving and using money intelligently, are rare. In the ranks of labor, very little of such brains can be found, and none whatsoever among the so-called leaders of labor. Not one laboring man in 10,000 could or would care to assume the responsibility of managing the business in which he works, if that opportunity were given to him on a silver platter. This fact is so well known that it needs no evidence to support it. The brains that manage capital must not only guide and efficiently direct the efforts of men, but they must also find a market for the products created. That, too, calls for highly skilled and specialized talent not to be found in the ranks of labor, except in rare instances. The products of labor must be transported from where they are manufactured to where they are consumed. That calls for highly specialized management in the field of transportation. It seems strange, indeed, that laboring men could be misled into believing that their troubles are over as soon as they appoint Lewis to speak for them. The most that a labor leader can do is to collect union membership fees and embarrass employers by tying up their business. This, however, does not solve the working man's problem, it only complicates his troubles. As a matter of fact, no single mind is, of itself, complete. Men who succeed in life in any undertaking of any proportion worthy of mention do so through alliance with other minds. Carnegie surrounded himself with many highly paid, highly skilled scientists, chemists, technicians, and business advisors. Without their friendly cooperation, he could not have accumulated his millions. It is worthy of note, however, that he paid them well. Suppose that some labor leader, with the aid of the United States government, drowned out the steel plants and starved them to death, then took them over. What then? Who would run them? Who would supply the necessary money to keep them operating? Who would sell the output of the mills? Who would transport the materials to where they were needed? Could Lewis run the steel mills as efficiently as Charles M. Schwab or Tom Girdler or Myron Taylor? Is there a single man in all the ranks of labor who could do so? Personally, I doubt it. These are some of the questions that both capital and labor should ask and answer before they are too ready to destroy one another. Everybody's business is nobody's business. Therefore, the proper side to take the initiative in settling this conflict is, without question, the men who control capital. As a matter of fact, they are the only ones who are capable of ending the conflict because they are the only ones really capable of managing the great industrial, financial, and economic structure on which this nation stands. Organized labor is manifestly a cause worthy of every consideration. In fact, it is so great a cause that it is entitled to, and should have leadership of the type of Lincoln, men with a sense of justice, level heads and, above all, honest hearts. No one known to the public in the ranks of labor leadership today comes within miles of meeting these requirements. Moreover, most of the labor leaders are looked upon by both their own followers and the public as being unfit to negotiate in a businesslike way with men of the type that manages capital. This does not make a pretty statement, but it has one redeeming feature: it is true. All of which is but another reason why the responsibility for taking the initiative in settling this labor dispute lies squarely on the shoulders of the capitalists. Power and superior intelligence, no matter where these virtues are found, carry with them the responsibility of duty and wisdom in their use. For every problem, there is a solution. It often happens that the person best fitted to solve a problem is someone not directly connected with or influenced by it. Oh yes, there is a solution for this labor racket. And let's call it by its right name, because that is just what it is, a plain, cruel, debasing racket. Two groups of people suffer most from this racket. One is the unfortunate victim who is coerced or misled into paying membership fees to support the racket, and the other is the public who pays the bill when the smoke of battle finally clears away. It is about time these two groups put their heads together and ended this fat racket. Therefore, we propose that every employer immediately announce that henceforth his business will be run by the management representing the men who supply the money, and properly chosen representatives of the men who furnish the brawn, under a golden rule policy of fair distribution of profits. We propose, also, that each employer appoint an advisory board made up of well-known, disinterested persons of the community who will sit in with the two groups representing capital and labor for the purpose of representing the third party, the public. If any industrialist made such an announcement, and backed it with deeds, all the labor leaders would be about as welcome in the ranks of their workers as Leon Trotsky would be if he should set foot in Russia. Capital has brains, lots of them. Why, in the name of high heaven, then, doesn't someone in this group awake to this opportunity, become real smart, and forever put an end to racketeers who collect huge tolls from both capital and labor every year? Here is a chance for some business leader to make himself and his business immortal by selling this idea to the industrialists and the public. This can best be done by deeds, not words. How to Sell Your Way Through Life, by Napoleon Hill, 1939. 39. The New World. When the sea of life shall once more have attained to calm, and when the world shall once more have settled down to its business of ordered living, peace, and prosperity, new leaders and a new brand of leadership will have made their appearance. In the fields of business, industry, religion, politics, and in fact, all fields of human endeavor, leaders will find more compensation in helping their followers than in accumulating millions of dollars for themselves. A new religion is in the process of being made. When this calm shall have come, and come it will, a new religion shall come with it, a religion of life, not a religion of death, a religion that will help people to live as well as to die, a religion whose followers will worship through the spirit and deed of useful service to one another instead of worshipping a dead ancestry, a religion whose leaders will teach the love and beauty of cooperative effort among men instead of fear and superstition, a religion whose followers will be made up of those who found dogma and creed inadequate for their needs and believe instead in the effectiveness of deeds. When this calm shall have come, politics and statesmanship shall have been removed from the category of racketeering and graft, and the people will find leaders in men and women who have caught the spirit of the new age, men who will understand and live by the golden rule. When this calm shall have come, nations will be led by men and women, who will settle all differences by arbitration and not by war. Warfare will be branded and regarded as what it really is, murder. Then Woodrow Wilson's name will take its rightful place along with those of Washington and Lincoln, and the world will pay more willing homage to the man who advocated a settlement of differences among nations by arbitration rather than warfare, and who finally fought a war to end wars, and then sought to establish an international accord to ensure permanent peace. When this calm shall have come, men who cheat and steal and besmirch the reputations of their fellow men, in order to accumulate millions of dollars which they do not need and cannot use, shall be treated with the contempt and scorn that they deserve. Visionary and utopian. Perhaps, if viewed from the level of intelligence on which the world now stands, but levels of intelligence change. Come back to these statements a dozen years hence. They will not then seem quite so visionary. If you had been told 20 years ago, that a score of passengers could be transported through the air at the rate of 150 miles an hour, you would have called that visionary, or if you had been told 30 years ago, that the ether all about you was filled with all manner of beautiful music, you would have cried out in amazement, crazy idea. We are living in a world of rapid change. Ignorance and superstition are on the run. Men no longer fear the punishment of fire and brimstone after death as they once feared it. Men no longer look upon God as cruel, capricious, or arbitrary. The truth about life is beginning to be known, and with it is coming considerable truth about God, and that which may happen after death. Truth makes men free. This is an age of experimentation and discovery. The world is learning to cut the fetters of ignorance and superstition and fear that have bound struggling mankind all down the ages. Today, man is beginning to stand erect and free above his self-sprung chains. It is no wonder that dogma and creeds are becoming less popular, and life and its needs more interesting. Whatsoever a man soweth that shall he also reap. Many religious leaders of the past have been among the most prolific sowers of the seed of fear. The world is now reaping the crop. Bigots and zealots of the past perpetuated their creeds largely through the weapon of fear, and up to the 18th century they effectively retarded civilization by discouraging men of science who sought to acquire and to spread truth and knowledge. Moreover, they discredited the philosophers and thinkers who endeavored to enlighten humanity. The immortal Emerson, at the time of his death, was persona non grata in the eyes of many leaders of orthodoxy. Thomas Paine was crucified on a cross of poisoned public opinion, and the same fate would have been Robert Ingersoll's, except for the fact that public opinion had become more generous and a bit more courageous during his time. The religion of the future will be a religion of faith, not a religion of fear. It will be a religion of life, not a religion of death. Its clergymen will do more teaching and less preaching. The fight between religion and science will cease, and the clergymen will prove that which they teach by scientific principles and by the laws of nature. The clergyman of the future will take his text from the known realities of life. He will prove by these facts that there is but one God, that this God permeates every atom of matter and every unit of energy throughout the universe, that he may be reached by every person who desires to approach him, not for a price, but through harmony and understanding, aspiration, and prayer. This is an age of unfoldment of the human mind, and with greater understanding of life will come leaders who will be capable of lifting us into still greater heights of wisdom and understanding. We are in the embryonic stage of that new age now. The colleges and universities of the world have hastened its dawn. The scientists have done their share and the clergymen, be it said to their everlasting credit, are falling in line and adapting themselves to the trend of this new age. Dawn is on the eastern hills, a new light is aglow in the sky. A new day is breaking, a day in which man will control his institutions and not be driven as a bond slave before them, a day in which the humanities shall prosper. Already, there is a widespread interest being taken by the clergy in the changes of civilization that have made the modernization of religion a necessity. Not long ago, the author had the privilege of attending a series of Sunday evening lectures delivered in the Vernon Place Methodist Church of Washington, D.C., by a group of statesmen and businessmen who spoke frankly of the new relationship developing between the church and industry. Significant was the fact that practically every pew was occupied. So, too, would the pews of every church be occupied if a part of its services were devoted to the solution of the pressing economic and personal problems that have enshrouded the world. Religion, like business, is undergoing and must continue to undergo radical changes and reformations. The religion of the future must be a religion of practical service to humanity, it must help men to satisfy their temporal as well as their spiritual needs. The religion of the future must be based upon practice as well as faith. Business has found it expedient to eliminate fear and oppression. Religion has done likewise. Business and religion are going to be more interdependent in the future. The author has wanted for more than 20 years to express these truths, but fear has stilled his pen. Age and experience, plus the rapid change that has taken place in the world since the beginning of the World War, have supplanted that fear with courage. Moreover, the changes that have taken place during the past 20 years have brought with them evidence of the soundness of these statements. Fear is man's worst enemy. Like a demon of hell, it sits upon one's shoulder and whispers, "You can't write that. It will hurt your business, it will deprive you of an income. You can't write this or you can't do that because of public opinion. You must not express new ideas nor advocate new ways of doing business because people will laugh at you." Fear of poverty and fear of criticism are two of man's worst enemies. They deprive men of their initiative, they stay the hand and the mind of the genius who might advance civilization 1,000 years in one generation, they deaden the faculty of creative imagination and cause it to atrophy and die because of lack of use and expression. This is an age when the world needs men of courage who will search for the truth and express it, no matter whom it may affect, for weal or for woe. When the suffering of the recent business depression shall have passed, it will make way for a new and better freedom than any the world has ever known, because it will be a freedom based upon faith and not upon fear, truth and not ignorance, training and not guesswork. The new freedom will give men the necessities of life and as many luxuries as may be actually needed to bring contentment, and in return for fewer hours of labor. It is a disgrace that men must labor 8 and 10 hours out of every 24 in order to gain just enough clothes to wear, sufficient food to eat, and a roof over one's head. 4 hours a day should be ample time in which to earn the 3 bare necessities of life. The new age of freedom will give the laborer a more equitable share of that which his labor produces. Employers will think in terms of human happiness and less in terms of dividends. If not out of choice, they will be forced to do so by necessity. The man who labors with his hands will enjoy freedom, not only from those who have exploited him in the past, but he will enjoy also freedom from that type of so-called labor leader who has in the past been more of an exploiter than a leader. Moreover, labor organizations in the future will operate under a system that recognizes the triumvirate of interests of 1. Labor, 2. Capital, and 3. The public, which both capital and labor serve. They will also, of necessity, operate under a system that will recognize and adequately reward individual superiority, instead of the present system that claims for the inefficient worker, as long as he pays his union dues, the same rewards and the same privileges as those enjoyed by the more efficient. Slaves and slave drivers, no matter in what walk of life, are becoming more and more a relic of a barbaric past. The crime we commit against children. The new freedom in its fullest form will protect little children from ignorant parents who plant the seed of fear in the minds of their offspring through corrective measures of brute force. Children will be managed by suggestion and by constructive example rather than by the rod. Moreover, the new freedom will permit children freedom of thought as well as freedom of action. Their minds will not be warped and limited through teachings that fill them with fear of God and of man. This new freedom must begin with absolute freedom of thought for children. The customs of the new age will not tolerate the practice of filling the minds of children with so much of the food of fear that they never actually come into possession of their own minds. Any emotions, and especially emotions of fear, planted in the minds of children through highly colored stories that appeal to the imagination, embed themselves in the subconscious minds of those children and may remain with them all through life. It is a crime to plant in the mind of a child any negative thought no matter what may be its nature or purpose. No human being has the right to hamper a child's chances of success in life merely because that person may have been responsible for the child's birth. Children do not belong to their parents. The parents are merely the custodians by whom a most precious temporary responsibility for their children has been assumed. A human being's earthly destiny may be, and usually is, fixed for him through the influences of his childhood. Children are often taught to steal and to tell lies as the result of mismanagement by parents. Ignorance of proper management on the part of mothers often brings about the degradation of thousands of young girls every year. There are no secrets of life that should be kept from children who reach the age of comprehensive understanding. The mystery of where children come from and why they come into the world should be explained to them as soon as they are old enough to understand it. Lies that parents tell their children about storks plant in the subconscious minds of those children the impulse to lie about other things. Children grow up, learn to think for themselves, and finally learn the truth. Often, their resentment against those who deceive them becomes marked and permanent. The inferiority complex must go. The age of freedom will not tolerate the practice of teaching children that men are worms of the dust, conceived and born in sin and should, therefore, fear God. On the contrary, it will teach children that man is conceived and born in the image of God, that man is limited in his achievements only by his own power to appropriate and use infinite intelligence. It is one of the glorious signs of the new age of freedom which has already dawned that the youths of this generation are not accepting in blind faith all the orthodox teachings of their elders. Let it be understood that the author's only charge against orthodoxy is that it has been the chief purveyor of fear all down the ages. The indictment is not against individuals, it is against a system that has enslaved alike the minds of its leaders and followers. The new age of freedom will teach the young the beauty and possibilities of the emotion of sex instead of treating the subject as if it were a thing of ugliness and sin. The subject of sex will be shorn of its mystery and it will be taught in the public schools by clean minds in a clean manner. Youths will be taught the true function of sex, including the values that may be had through transmutation of this beautiful emotion. They will be taught the truth about sex energy, that it is the most powerful of all the human emotions, that it has a therapeutic value unknown in the connection with other emotions, that it is capable, when controlled, transmuted, and intelligently directed, not only of perpetuating life, but of developing business or professional genius as well. The object of this book is to provoke thought. It was not written with the purpose of reformation nor with the purpose of destroying faith in any religion, nor with the purpose of influencing others to think as the author thinks. The author does not claim to be infallible, and he is more than willing to have his opinions and beliefs passed upon by a jury made up of people who have been disciplined in the art of accurate thought. The writing of this book has been truly a labor of love, and the author has been paid for his labor 100 times by the thoughts that have kept him company as he worked, thoughts that inspired him with courage and left no place in his mind for despondency or fear, thoughts that attuned his heart to these words of Max Ehrmann. Let me do my work each day, and if the darkened hours of despair overcome me, may I not forget the strength that comforted me in the desolation of other times. May I still remember the bright hours that found me walking over the silent hills of my childhood, or dreaming on the margin of the quiet river, amid the tempests of the changing years. Spare me from bitterness and from the sharp passions of unguarded moments. May I not forget that poverty and riches are of the Spirit. Though the world know me not, may my thoughts and actions be such as shall keep me friendly with myself. Lift my eyes from the earth, and let me not forget the uses of the stars. Forbid that I should judge others, lest I condemn myself. Let me not follow the clamor of the world, but walk calmly in my path. Give me a few friends who will love me for what I am, and keep ever burning before my vagrant steps the kindly light of hope. And though age and infirmity overtake me, and I come not within sight of the castle of my dreams, teach me still to be thankful for life, and for time's olden memories that are good and sweet, and may the evening's twilight find me gentle still. The future demands dreamers with courage. The whole world now needs, and is demanding, a new group of pioneers who have the capacity to conceive new plans, new ideas, new inventions, men and women who have, also, the courage and the initiative to blaze new trails in every walk of life. These new leaders and discoverers will be required in politics, in religion, in banking, in transportation, in industry and business, in cation, in the professions, on the farms, in city planning, in art, music and literature, in journalism, and on the screen and stage. The business depression marked the death of one age and the birth of another. This new changed world will require dreamers who can put their dreams into action. The dreamers have always been the pattern makers of civilization. Through faith, courage, and imagination, they harness the intangible and unseen forces of unborn opportunity and build great skyscrapers, convert forests and deserts into cities, and turn frontiers into marts of trade. Any person who, in the future, cherishes a lofty dream and holds fast to it will be more than apt to see that dream become a reality, for this is an age that is favorable to the practical dreamers. Columbus dreamed of an unknown world and discovered it. Copernicus dreamed of a multiplicity of worlds and revealed them. Henry Ford, poor and uneducated, dreamed of a horseless carriage, steadfastly held to that dream, and now the evidence that he dreamed soundly belts the entire earth. Edison dreamed of a machine that would record and reproduce the sound of the human voice and stood by his dream, through countless failures, until his dream became a splendid reality. Wayland dreamed of a chain of cigar stores, transformed his dream into action, and now the United Cigar Stores occupy the best corners in every city in America. Lincoln dreamed of freedom for the black slaves, and a united North and South have translated his dream into a reality. Other dreamers, of the Lincoln type, are going to dream of freedom for the white slaves of America and live to see their dreams come true. The Wright brothers dreamed of a machine that would conquer the air, and now one may see evidence that dreams can be made to become true, because this evidence fills the air in flocks all over the world. Marconi dreamed of a system for harnessing the intangible forces of the ether. Evidence that he did not dream in vain may be seen in every radio set in the world. The greatest achievement was at first, and for a time, a dream. The oak sleeps in the acorn, the bird waits in the egg, and in the highest vision of the soul a waking angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of reality. Awake, arise, dreamers of America. The world is filled with an abundance of opportunity, such as the dreamers of the past never knew. A burning desire to be and to do is the starting point from which the dreamer must take off. Dreams are not born of indifference, laziness, or lack of ambition. The business depression was one of the greatest blessings the world has ever known. It paved the way for the dreamer-doers and provided them with opportunities they never would have known without it. Don't say, "There isn't a chance today." The world no longer scoffs at the dreamer nor calls him impractical. Instead, it beckons to him to bring forth his ideas and plans and sets up before him prizes of both money and glory equivalent to a king's ransom. You have been disappointed, have undergone temporary defeat, have felt the great heart within your breast crushed. Take courage from the knowledge that these experiences have tempered the spiritual metal of which you were made, that they are assets of incomparable values. Remember, too, that most men and women who succeed in life get off to a bad start and pass through much struggle before they arrive. The turning point in the lives of those who succeed usually comes at the moment of some crisis through which they are introduced to their other selves. Lincoln became great only after disappointment over his love for and Rutledge had penetrated and illuminated his soul. John Bunyan wrote The Pilgrim's Progress, which is among the finest of English literature, after he had been confined in prison and sorely punished because of his religious belief. O. Henry discovered the genius that slept within his brain while confined in a prison cell, in Columbus, Ohio. Being forced, through his misfortune, to become acquainted with his other self, he discovered himself to be a great author instead of a miserable criminal and outcast. Thomas A. Edison was a tramp telegraph operator, and failed innumerable times before he was driven, by his temporary defeats, to the discovery of the genius that slept within his brain. Milo C. Jones accumulated a fortune of more than $1 million from the exploitation and sale of Little Pig sausage, after he had been stricken with total paralysis. Prior to that emergency, he had been trying to earn his living with his hands. His physical handicap introduced him to his own brain and to that other self that dwelt within the brain. Charles Darwin was considered a dull boy, but his imagination became fired with a burning desire for knowledge and lo! The world had discovered a genius through whom civilization has been stepped up no less than 1,000 years. Demosthenes stammered, but his desire to become a great orator was stronger than his physical handicap. He wrote his name deep in the records of men who achieved success because they made stepping stones of their handicaps. Charles Dickens began his career by pasting labels on blacking pots. Helen Keller became deaf, dumb, and blind shortly after birth. Despite her misfortune, she has written her name indelibly in the pages of history, and her entire life has served as evidence that men and women are never defeated until they accept defeat in their own minds. Robert Burns was an illiterate country lad, was cursed by poverty, and grew up to be a drunkard in the bargain. The world was made better because of the beautiful thoughts that he clothed in poetry. Booker T. Washington was born in slavery and cursed by his race and color. He left his impress, for good, upon an entire race of people. Napoleon began as a private in the French armies. Adversity, disappointment, and temporary defeat drove him to contemplate suicide before his star began its ascendancy. Beethoven was deaf and Milton was blind. Nasa McMean slept in an attic, in New York City, before her front page magazine cover drawings began to bring $3,000 each. The road to success lies through many a thorny course, over many an obstacle, from which the fainting heart is often tempted to turn back. But hope and a sense of power within inspire the struggling person still to continue the conflict, till at last courage and perseverance meet with their just reward, and success comes. Henry Irving. We come now to the end of our journey. Before our paths separate and we go our respective ways in life, the author wishes to leave with you these thoughts, the accumulation of which has required much experience and struggle and hardship. Nothing which you have or ever may have in the way of worldly possessions is worth the price of fear and worry. Nothing brings enduring happiness except achievement in that sort of service that brings happiness to others. Human longings cannot be satisfied by things of monetary value alone. Happiness is not possible without freedom of both body and mind. Freedom is an aim for which every human being is striving, whether that fact is recognized or not. Great riches do not always bring freedom, usually wealth brings only more responsibilities and fears and worries. No man is free as long as any evidence of fear finds housing in his mind. These are hazardous times through which all mankind is passing, hazardous because of the spirit of discontent and indecision and fear that are everywhere in evidence. Be careful not to be caught in the maelstrom of this chaos. If you should become engulfed in it, remember that no one can extricate you from its overpowering current of despair except yourself. You are truly the master of your own fate, the captain of your own soul, because you are what you are as the result of your own habits of thought. Habits may be changed. In this book, you have been informed of the principles through which thought habits may be changed. Here, your guide must leave you. The remainder of the journey must be completed by you alone. Whether the trip is beautiful or ugly, pleasant or unpleasant, will depend upon what use you make of your own power of thought. If it were required of me that I condensed the substance of this book, and stated in one sentence, "These are the words in which I would do it, you have a mind which you may control, and inasmuch as this mind can penetrate infinite intelligence, at your will you possess, therefore, the answer to all your problems, and the medium by which you can acquire all material things you need." Before departing, the author wishes you an abundance of courage and peace and faith. If you have these states of mind, all other things that you need will come to you when you need them. Pray let Emerson express my thought for me, in these words. Every proverb, every book, every byword that belongs to thee for aid or comfort shall surely come home through open or winding passages. Every friend whom not thy fantastic will, but the great and tender soul in thee craveth, shall lock thee in his embrace. How to Sell Your Way Through Life, by Napoleon Hill, 1939. 40. Rounding out your success qualities for leadership. Rare it is to find a man with an all-around equipment for success. As a general rule, people are strong on some success qualities and weak on others. Broadly speaking, anyone's success is determined by two things: 1. His ability to get, 2. His ability to hold. All around you, you can see brilliant men who are past masters in the art of getting what they want: money, position, friends, influence, custom, heirs, anything they want. But when they get these things they are unable to hold them. Obviously, in a book of this size devoted mainly to teaching the basic principles of how to sell your way through life, it is impossible to include the wide range of facts necessary to make the fully rounded out success mind. Other books have been prepared that do this in a practical, fascinating, sure way. Because of the sincere hope that every reader of Napoleon Hill's book will come to possess a high degree of both 1. Ability to get, and 2. Ability to hold, we ask your indulgence in the following. A few words from the publishers. Frankly, this is the business department of the Ralston Society. We want to have a little chat with you as you come to the end of this book. For over 50 years, Ralston has supplied hundreds of thousands, yes, probably millions, of ambitious men and women with home study books that bring health, wealth, power, and happiness. We have many unusual, private, exciting instruction books embracing all human powers. From time to time, we will extend an invitation to you to read these courses. But for the time being, let us concentrate upon the inspiring message that Napoleon Hill, author of How to Sell Your Way Through Life, has for you. So great a businessman and master of success as John Wanamaker, merchant prince of New York and Philadelphia, speaking of earlier books written of Mr. Hill, said, "If I had a young son I would insist that he read every word of the books by Napoleon Hill, and the books by Dr. These two men are, perhaps, the most inspirational writers in the world. I know the 17 fundamentals of success are sound because I have been applying them in my business for more than 30 years. Napoleon Hill has written a postgraduate course for you. It is because we sincerely feel that every reader of this book should go on into this postgraduate course, known as the Law of Success, that we take the liberty here of giving a few brief highlights upon this brilliant work. The Law of Success presents, for the first time in the history of the world, the true philosophy upon which all lasting success is built. Ideas, when translated into intelligent plans of action, are the beginning of all successful achievement. So the Law of Success proceeds to show you how to create practical ideas for every human need. It does it in easy-to-understand lessons. Napoleon Hill spent the better part of 25 years in perfecting this philosophy of success. During the long years he has worked on it, some parts or the whole of it, have been reviewed and praised by many of the greatest Americans of our times. Among them are included 4 presidents of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Warren G. Harding, William H. Taft, Thomas Edison, Luther Burbank, William J. Wrigley, Alexander Graham Bell, Judge E. H. Gary, Cyrus H. K. Curtis, Edward Bach, E. M. Statler, dozens of glowing names in politics, finance, education, and invention. Andrew Carnegie started it. Over 25 years ago, Napoleon Hill, then a young special investigator for a nationally known business magazine, was sent to interview Andrew Carnegie. During that interview, Carnegie slyly dropped a hint of a certain master power he used, a magic law of the human mind, a little-known psychological principle, which was amazing in its power. Carnegie suggested to Hill that upon that principle he could build the philosophy of all personal success, whether it be measured in terms of money, power, position, prestige, influence, accumulation of wealth. That part of the interview never went into Hill's magazine. But it did launch the young author upon over 20 years of research. And today, we open to you the discovery and methods of using the revolutionary force that Carnegie quietly hinted at. The thrilling methods of using it are now taught in 8 textbooks known as the Law of Success. In the trail of the Law of Success, lessons become accomplishments, not mere entertainment and time-killing diversion. There come larger boosy-nesses, bigger bank accounts, fatter pay envelopes, small, struggling enterprises given new life and power to grow, low-paid employees shown how to gain advancement by leaps and bounds. It is impossible in this small space to give any real idea of the inspiring, revealing lessons in the 8 textbooks of the Law of Success. But, you will realize that a wonderful treat is in store for you when you read what some American leaders, who saw parts of the philosophy while in process of creation, have said. Allow me to express my appreciation of the compliment you have paid me in sending the original manuscript of the Law of Success. I can see you have spent a great deal of time and thought in its preparation. Your philosophy is sound and you are to be congratulated for sticking to your work over so long a period of years. Your students will be amply rewarded for their labor. Thomas A. Edison, world's greatest inventor. Your work and mine are peculiarly akin. I am helping the laws of nature to create more perfect specimens of vegetation while you are using those same laws through the Law of Success to build more perfect specimens of thinkers. Luther Burbank, world-famous scientist. Certainly I will supply you with the information you request. This I consider to be not only a duty, but it is a pleasure as well. You are laboring on behalf of the people who have neither the time nor the inclination to ferret out the causes of failure and success. Theodore Roosevelt, former President of the United States. Our entire business policy, in the management of our hotels, is based upon the 17 fundamentals of the Law of Success, of which I am a student. E. M. Statler, founder of Great Hotel System. I feel greatly indebted for the privilege of reading your Law of Success philosophy. If I had had this 50 years ago, I suppose I could have accomplished all that I have done in less than half the time. I sincerely hope the world will discover and reward you. Robert Dollar, steamship magnate, the Dollar Lines. Napoleon Hill has produced what I believe to be the first practical philosophy of achievement. Its major distinguishing feature is the simplicity in which it has been presented. David Starr Jordan, Leland Stanford University. The best evidence of the soundness of the Law of Success, with which I am personally acquainted, is the noteworthy achievement of Mr. Curtis, who has built one of the greatest publishing businesses in the world by applying the principles of this philosophy. Edward Bach, former editor, Ladies' Home Journal. You may say for Mr. Rockefeller that he endorses Mr. Hill's 17 fundamental principles of success, and that he recommends them to those who are seeking the highway to achievement. Secretary to John D. Rockefeller. Evidence that money could not buy. The foregoing is evidence and praise seldom accorded any course of education. Money could not buy such letters of endorsement from men who are, or have been, leaders of our times. Millions of books have been written to amuse, to entertain, to help you while away your idle hours. But here in the Law of Success are 8 vibrating, power-radiating books that shape your destiny, enrich your future, and turn your hopes and dreams into solid success realities. Don't waste your own precious years blindly searching for the hidden road to the heights. Profit by the dearly bought experience of America's leaders. Over 500 great and prominent men of America were minutely analyzed, their methods, motives, strategy, to find out the secrets that put them on top. No matter whether you are rich or poor, you have one asset as great as the richest man living, and that is time. But with each setting sun, you become one day older and have one day less in which to attain the success and wealth you desire. Thousands of progressive people throughout the North American continent have realized this mighty truth and have sought the help so clearly and inspiringly taught in Napoleon Hill's law of success. You cannot afford to let day after day slip into eternity without getting possession of this course. You will profit greatly from the lessons in how to sell your way through life. You will take even more brilliant and gratifying rewards from the law of success. The cost is trifling, the benefits are tremendous. May we tell you in detail about the law of success? If you say, yes, then write us that you are a reader of this book and would like detailed information about the law of success. The Ralston Society Department, 2 Meriden, Connecticut. You need have no fear of competition from the person who says, I'm not paid to do this and I'll not do it. He will never be a dangerous competitor for your job. But watch out for the fellow who remains at his work until it is finished and performs a little more than is expected of him, for he may challenge you at the post and pass you at the grandstand.